Welcome back to the B2B Uncut podcast, sponsored by Oro Commerce. I am your host, Aaron, and I am joined today by Sam. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sam
Yes.
Schwartz, who has quite a resume, serving in a variety of roles in B2B companies in various digital, B2B commerce, customer experience roles. She's been at this a long time and has, I think, a lot of valuable lessons and advice to share with all of us today. So, Sam, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem, Aaron. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so I kind of teed it off with you've got this great resume and we want to show not tell. So why don't you show our listeners verbally, you don't have to pull out a chart, where have you worked and what have you done? Why should they care about what Sam Schwartz has to say about B2B e-commerce?
Yeah. So I have spent the last 15 years or so working as a digital transformation and digital experience leader. I've worked with B2B distributors and manufacturers like McMaster-Carr, Zoro, ISN, Jensen Precast, and my roles have really been all about digitizing our relationships with our customers and for our colleagues. I've done things like lead strategy on core technology implementations like PIM, CRM, ecom platforms, on-site search, things like that. But I've also worked on a lot of big user experience changes for websites, digital analytics, implementing digital analytics programs, and merchandising efforts for these companies. So that's a little rundown of some of the things that I've done in the last few years.
You don't have to say exactly how many years. Yeah, we're polite here. Yeah, it's interesting. You're the second guest in a row with history at McMaster-Carr. We just had Jason Hine on a couple of weeks ago. I met him when he was at Bloomreach, I think originally, but of course he was at McMaster-Carr for. In fact, if you're on calls with Jason, he's still got some of the catalogs behind him on a shelf. Yeah. I don't even know that episode has aired yet. By the time this goes out, that one will be there. For anybody who missed that one, though, and who doesn't know what McMaster-Carr is, can you explain, like, what are they and why are they good at what they do, and maybe a little bit of what you did with them? Because, Jason had a lot of nice things to say about the company. I've certainly run into them many times.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say I'm very jealous that Jason has a catalog that he can look at. Those are hard to come by, and they're really cool. So if you ever get a chance to look at one, you should do it. But McMaster-Carr, so they are one of the largest MRO distributors in the U.S. They have something like 700,000 items, something around that number that they warehouse across a bunch of locations. And they're known for having some of the best customer service and product content in the industry. So McMaster is good at what they do for several reasons. So first and foremost, they put their customers first. They understand their customers' needs, they respond to them, they anticipate them in a way that's consistent with their brand and their capabilities. So that's the first one. They make it really simple for their customers to do business with them. The second one, and I'll bet Jason touched on this as well, is that they understand the foundational importance of data. So specifically product data, customers, their competitors, they regard McMaster as having basically the best data, product content, and shopping experience online in their catalog. But they wouldn't have that shopping experience if they didn't spend so much time carefully curating their content and gathering data about those products. Maybe Jason talked about this. I'm sure he did, but
Oh, he's Mr. Product Data. Yes.
he's Mr. Product Data. Yes. And, he spends a lot of time talking about making sure your data is consistent and correct. And McMaster puts a ton of effort into making that happen. And I'll as a side note, I think that while they do put a lot of work into that, people can take that as a lesson that if you want an excellent shopping experience, especially for things like search, SEO, I mean, it lends itself to pretty much every area of digital marketing. It really starts with your product data. Um, and then the third thing that I think they do really well is ensuring that their processes and their technology support their customers, support their employees, and support their business objectives. So they're always looking for ways to improve those things, but they really understand that that processes and tech are tools for people.
Mm.
And it really makes everyone's jobs easier, right? Like if you have a great website, if you have great search, your customers can find what they want. Your employees can serve your customers better if they have better technology. And you'll meet your goals. And, we're all out there to make more money every year. So, you can use those things to do that too, or whatever your business objectives happen to be.
And it's shareholder value, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the so it's interesting. You kind of touched on this in a couple of different ways about the shopping experience and the sort of the value of digital, the value of e-commerce, right? Underpinned by the product data, but just who it's benefiting. And we were talking in the green room before the digital green room before we started recording this. Um, and then you and I had an interesting conversation that I'd love to share with listeners about like what is B2B e-commerce? Because it's one of those things that's sort of existential for a software company like us. But when we see how our customers use our product at Oro to do B2B e-commerce, there's usually a lot of different channels. There's a lot of different ways of presenting information, a lot of different interactions between buyers and sellers that are going on. And it's all under sort of the digital like umbrella. But like what is B2B e-commerce seems to vary like a lot. And you've been in a number of companies that have done it in different ways, it sounds like. I'm kind of curious, what is your answer to the question, what is B2B e-commerce? And would you distinguish your answer between a manufacturer and a distributor? Does it look the same for both of them, or do you think it serves the same purpose for both?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, honestly, I think that B2B e-commerce can manifest itself differently, across industries, types of companies, things like that. Just because customer needs are different, right? And if you're doing digital in a meaningful way, it means that you are solving problems, specific problems for your specific customer set. So I do think that it can vary, but the way I really like to think about it is um, like empowered, connected commerce. So digital is really just about connecting your customer's journey, no matter what kind of customer they are, and really no matter when their touch points are occurring with you. So I think a lot of people used to think there's probably a lot of people who still see their customer journey as this linear kind of progression. And that's just not how people interact in general. They're going all over the place. They're learning, they're making decisions, they're going back and forth in their journey with you, possibly with your competitors. And it's really our job, especially with digital, to be there at the right moment of need, be making sure that your customer will find you and your interactions are easy and seamless. So you're empowering your customers through this. They can find what they need. It's really easy, and you're connecting with them and they feel connected. So, I think that that's why it's not just your e-commerce platform. It's not just an add to cart button. It is really about making sure that you are solving the problems that your customers are there to solve with you. So I think, we've you and I think we talked about this, but we've all had that experience, right? Where you call customer service,
Hmm.
help, and then you get like passed around to like seven
Or
different people. They're like, "Oh, right, that's not my department," whatever. And
Mhm.
then you end up having to explain your problems over and over and over again to each person that you talk to,
Yeah.
until the right person like figures out how to help you. And I think like B2B commerce should be solving that type of problem. It should be kind of allowing the people in your business to have a full understanding of what those customer touch points have been in, recently in the past, giving them the information, tools, and power to solve problems and provide an excellent experience for your customer. Um, and then giving your customers faith that, as business, we can do that for them every time, that they're not going to call us and be like, I bought this thing. It didn't
Right.
come. Oh, I can't help you with that. That's the return, whatever. That's the shipping department, So like I think that in the end, yes, it's buying. It certainly is buying, but it's also every other thing that kind of goes into this journey and these touch points that your customers have with you.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting. And I've had this conversation a few times before where e-commerce is viewed within the manufacturer, the distributor as like a branch, like a digital branch, right? Meaning that it has its own P&L, it has its own sort of purpose. It's the equivalent of like I opened up a store with counter sales and I decided whether e-commerce was success or a failure based on the revenue coming across that counter at that
Mhm,
digital branch. And that is a very sort of isolated view of what digital commerce. It makes sense because that's what it sounds like it should be,
mhm.
but it often isn't because the things that you build to enable e-commerce inside of the business actually help the people at the returns counter, the people at the shipping counter, the
Yeah.
customers who aren't talking to a rep, and all the rest of it. And I was thinking, you were a VP of e-commerce at Jensen Precast, and what does Jensen Precast sell? It wasn't
Yeah,
obvious to me from the name.
sure. So Jensen Precast they manufacture and sell underground infrastructure. So it's all the stuff you never see, right? So it's
Right.
like sewer systems, electrical vaults, septic tanks, water infiltrations to provide you power, water, clean water, take dirty water away from you, things like that.
Got
So
it. Okay.
yeah, it's a pretty complex product that
Yeah,
it
that's not casually bought, and there's probably a long RFP process that leads up to it. I was noticing that all of the things you did on your LinkedIn talking about, Jensen Precast, you have a PIM implementation, you have a CRM implementation, you were doing digital marketing, you were doing SEO,
Mhm.
and from kind of the way you'd answered the earlier question, e-commerce, it sounds like what you're saying is sort of a label for every digital touch point that connects to acquiring the customer. So that's why you, as VP of e-commerce, were involved with SEO and digital marketing, right? As well as CRM.
Yeah.
And then product discovery. So connecting back to the McMaster-Carr conversation, making sure you've got adequate, rich product data in the PIM that then is accessible to everybody in the company, whether e-commerce is in their title or not. That's is kind of an important part. And then the post-purchase account management, which again ties back to the CRM. If you've got help desk, if you've got case management of any kind, that customer service pickup, like who is answering the phone? Do they have the information to answer the customer's questions at their fingertips? Or do they have to go find a spreadsheet on someone's desktop who is 3 cubicles down to answer that question? Because that's not a great experience for the customer in that case. But as you said it yourself, like the add to cart piece is almost optional. Like it's this stuff that surrounds everything the customer or buyer wants to know and how they interact with your organization and whether they bought online is almost irrelevant to whether or not it's e-commerce. And that's so mind blowing. How does digital sort of support, in your experience, the whole business, even when there is no add to cart or
Yeah.
e-commerce button?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say like the add to cart experience is ideal, right? Like
Sure.
it makes it easy. It's just another way. It's another way for your customer to interact with you. But calls to action might be different for different experiences and different companies. I mean, for us at where we were as a business, you're right. The RFP process was long. It could be anywhere from, you know, a day to years long, depending on the project that was being quoted. And add to that, customers aren't often educated in what exactly they need, right? So they often will need that support from our sales reps or from a product manager to say like, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I think I need this kind of product, but can you help me understand what exactly it is that I need to purchase?" So there's kind of different journeys in there as well. But yeah, I mean, technology implementation is all about empowerment and visibility into your business. And so like the right technology like CRM, like PIM, can help your business scale. Um, and so a lot of what I did was really this foundational piece of putting the right tools in place so that you didn't have to go get the spreadsheet on your colleague's desk, or you didn't have to go look in a folder somewhere to figure out what things cost, what pricing do we give this very good customer, that kind of thing. And so I I think like there's a huge difference between having good technology that can remove that barrier of manual work and creating that seamless experience for the customer, and then having technology that isn't really working for you, isn't helping you move faster, isn't helping you create visibility.
Yep.
Um, so even though our website wasn't pure e-commerce, you know, you couldn't like actually purchase on it yet. Just by improving the experience through better merchandising, implemented faceted search, providing better product content through an e-commerce like experience, we saw a ton of improvements and revenue supporting, calls to action. So like we saw when we implemented the new site, we saw a 30% year-over-year improvement in requests for quotes.
Oh,
We
wow.
yeah, exactly. Actually, it blew my mind too. I was like, "Is this right? Like,
That's
are these
huge.
real
That's
people?"
huge.
Yeah,
So hold on for everybody who's listening. I think what Sam is saying is that if you build e-commerce, you will get a 30% increase in request for quote. Like,
don't quote me on that, but this is what happened for us, right?
sure.
Like, we understood that our customers wanted better data. They wanted to be able to request things online. They wanted to reach out and help us. We just weren't giving them that opportunity before. They wanted to reach out to us to help them is what I meant to say, but
Right. Well, it's interesting too
driving
because I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of stats around buyer journeys starting online, right? The people talk about Amazon a lot, probably for something that for what Jensen Precast is selling, not so much. Amazon Business is not selling electrical vaulting, but
yet.
it is the yeah, right. Yeah. That's something else to thank Jason Hine for since he was part of Amazon Business. Um, I feel like if we keep dropping his name, he's gonna appear. So I guess what sort of like jumps out at me um, is the idea that customers want to talk to somebody, but they're gonna start by Googling you. They're gonna start, and they're not just looking for you. They're looking for. They may start by Googling the product that they need and seeing who shows up in results. If you don't have an SEO and paid strategy, you're not present for when
That's
they
right.
start doing their research. Then, if they start looking at multiple possible suppliers for what they need to be able to compare. People want to compare apples to apples, so they want to see that what's on their bid sheet, what's in their RFP that they think they need is available, and that you sell it. If they can't easily find that, you're not going to get that quote request because they don't know that you sell the thing that they need. And
Yep.
so, totally understand and agree with that. Like that is a solid point. And it's funny. We had I had a fastener distributor on the podcast last year, and she had been gone early on sort of e-commerce pre-COVID,
Mm.
and the call to action on the site was request for quote. There was no add to cart button. There was no full e-commerce experience. I haven't gone back and checked her site lately to see if she's added it, but that's what it was. But it saved she said like it saved our business during COVID basically because we couldn't rely on counter sales. We couldn't rely on in-person sales visits or even a lot of the old way of doing things. People were going online And we were one of the only ones in our niche that had their catalog digitized and on the line so that if you search for part, you could find it and start the
Mm.
sales process with them right there. And even though it wasn't pure e-commerce. So really connects with what you said about the 30% increase in RFQ
Yeah.
because people know you're there.
Yep, that's exactly it, and, like, probably very similar to that guest, it's a we had a lot of competitors too that, like, they weren't all digitized, so it was an opportunity for us to get ahead, in that space, especially with SEO. If you can if you can clamp down on having the best content out there, you'll get the traffic and also you'll get the trust. I've seen so many times at other companies too where people are just like, I don't know, this company has the best information online and maybe it's not the best price, but I I know what I'm getting. So that is also something to keep in mind with your product data. Is if you have the best product data and you have the best content, you might just win that sale because they can't guarantee that this other competitor with no content is gonna give them what they want. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely the case. You're establishing trust from the very beginning. And if it looks like you've put in the work on digital, then I think they will trust that you'll put in the work on the fulfillment and the customer
yep,
service end of it.
yep,
Yeah,
yep,
completely true.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, one more example, I guess, from, like, just because we weren't purchasing online yet, we did also digitize services to increase operational efficiency as
Oh,
well.
nice.
So, yeah, one of the things that we did was we implemented a digital invoicing and cash customer payment portal. So we had customers with, they would get invoiced, they had 30 days, and then we had customers that had to pay, right? They ordered and they had to pay right away. Um, Even if it was just over the phone. So, but we didn't have a way for them to go online and put in their credit card number or pay their invoices online or anything like that. So, um, we built that and it ended up saving us about like 45 hours of like manual entry, typing in credit card
Sure.
numbers, and also just applying payments, things like that. And it decreased time to pay for those invoices by, about 4 or 5 days. Um,
Oh, huge,
yeah,
huge.
huge. And so that allowed, sales, AR, and the collections team just more time to spend, with more complex or sensitive situations as opposed to punching in a credit card number, over the phone.
Right, or doing a or trying to, futz around with a wire transfer, which can
Yeah.
require a lot of sort of specialized time and attention to do and sort of underwriting and validating accounts. It's funny you mentioned that too, because we're releasing an invoice portal for this exact purpose, next month, actually, because it's a super common customization for requests, and we're just rolling it into the core product, and there's the checkout process where, of course, we're an e-commerce platform, so of course, you can pay a checkout, but that's not how it works. It's all net 30, net 45, net 60. What happens in that invoice may represent multiple digital orders rolled into one. That
Mhm.
piece of it, digitizing that it speeds up your quote to cash cycle immensely because you're putting fewer barriers and requiring fewer phone calls, right? And it also helps with the swivel chair problem a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And that was your sort of like all the 45 hours of manual entry where I've got like my ERP, I've got my bank software. I've got a spreadsheet where I'm actually tracking OpenAR, probably because the ERP doesn't do it the right way to match what my customer data model is. Yeah. And you're just 10 keying data from one system into another system into another system. And you're kind of hoping that it'll all reconcile at the end. And
Mhm.
it often does not, which is why there's so much time. I want to switch gears a little bit because we're just sort of going through your resume and your experience. And I want to pull out a nugget from every place you've worked. So I saw that you were at Zoro Tools for quite a long time. I think everybody listening to this podcast has probably heard of Zoro Tools. Certainly, they've heard of Granger. Um, you were pretty close to the founding at Zoro. It looked like, and I saw a variety of different roles, like, which I know what it's like. When you're early stage, like your job changes constantly. Ask me how many titles I've had. So what was the sort of magic at Zoro? Because Zoro is sort of perceived, and you corrected me on this. I thought Zoro had been acquired by Granger because that's kind of a popular, but that's not actually the story. So, like, what's the Zoro story? What was the magic at Zoro that you and your team built? And then what was the actual sort of conclusion of that journey with Granger?
Yeah. Well, so Grainger, as most people know, is really, really good at serving larger customers. I think that I know that there's a lot of smaller companies out there who have to buy at list, they have a list price and things like that. And, um, you know, at the time that Zoro was founded, it was like an internal startup at the time. That's when Amazon Supply, as it used to be known, was getting its start. And Amazon is such a powerhouse. I think that Grainger really needed an answer to like, how are we going to capture this like small business middle market area if Amazon was coming on the scene? Um, and so I wasn't there at, day 0, but, my understanding is that it started as like, how do we solve this problem for our customers? And this was the idea that rose out of, the the garden of ideas. And so I started probably about 8 months in since their founding. And, as far as like the magic, um, we really just had a philosophy, right? Be where your customer is. Don't wait for them to come to you. Go find them. Go be where they are. Make it easy to do business with us. Do not put, you know, really intense barriers to entry. So, we had guest, I mean, it's everyone has it now. Well, I shouldn't say that. So many websites have it now, but guest checkout.
Oh, yeah.
Like, like, like,
Right.
I think that's a little bit of a scary thought for some, especially for some like B2B businesses. Um, but really, there's no better way for a customer to kind of like try you out and see if this is a good fit. Um, and why not get the one-offs, right? If someone's looking for a, a bolt online and you have it, why not let them purchase it?
Right.
And then really just being able to test and learn and fail fast. And Zoro was a great place to work. They are doing amazing things. I will not deny that. But it doesn't mean that they have, those philosophies. Like everyone can adopt those types of philosophies, right?
Right.
Well,
Right.
they
It's interesting because when I run
good
into,
at
I run into Granger folks at lots of conferences and shows and have for many, many years, right? Obviously, as you said, they're very successful, probably the best known space and the best known brand, I think, in the B2B sales business. Um, and there's so much emphasis on sort of that larger customer and kind of like, building out those big centers of excellence. And it's, it's like you kind of run into this trap at trade shows just in general, like, no matter what industry you are. Sort of the big names that are on stage are the people with the massive budgets and the existing brand recognition, which is why they got invited to be on stage in the first place. But like, how applicable are the things they're going to say to the majority of people who are in the cheap seats, like watching, right? And I think with Zorro, what you guys built, those lessons that you're talking about are way more accessible and useful to the vast majority of people who are going to be listening to this podcast. If you're a $500 million distributor, you have a different set of tools available to you than if you're a $3 billion distributor.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. But those ideas, um, they can be used by anybody. They can be used by like, if I started a distribution business tomorrow, I would take that with me because that's really what gets you over that hump of like, how do I get customers to trust me, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I do think that like the companies I've worked for that have been successful on their digital journey, they embrace this, like, action-oriented kind of thinking. Like, "Let's just go. Let's just try. Oh, something doesn't work? Let's move on. Where are the ideas? Let's go try those out." So, it does sound simple, but it does require taking risks. I just remember, like, you mentioned I had a lot of rules there. I will say, like, this is a part of your growth, right? Like, you try new things work, and then you realize, like, "Oh, that worked. We have to put some power behind that," right?
Yeah.
So, I think that was definitely part of, my journey there for sure, but, when we were starting our first marketplace presence on eBay, I do remember there were detractors, right? Like the business, my family friend, they were like, "Well, that sounds crazy," And they kind of scoffed at the not every right? Like obviously there were people who were like, "Let's go try it. There could be opportunity there." But um, I think that those people thought it wouldn't be profitable. No one would buy like, weird industrial supplies on eBay, or it would diminish the brand or whatever. There were so many reasons people thought of not to do it. But, our leadership was obsessed with finding opportunities and they saw the potential reward, of being where the eyeballs were. And in the end, the program was a really huge success. It brought in a significant amount of incremental top line and, um, you know, you gotta try things to know if
You got to
they'll
try
work.
new things. You got to plan for growth and not for shrinking. And I love action oriented thinking. I think that might actually be the show title for this episode. That's such a great way of sort of like, are you biased to action in your leadership team when it comes to how you're going to grow the business? Because anybody can come up with 1,000 reasons why it will fail or never work. Um, but seeing the opportunity and being willing to take the chance, you can acknowledge the risks. You can still take steps to mitigate the risks. But ultimately, if you never take any risks, your business will shrink over time because your competitors certainly are.
And I think, like, that's the kind of the hard part, right? Like, people are afraid of taking risks, and it takes courage to move past, like, that ego of, like, "Oh, man, my idea didn't work," and I think that, like, being able to kind of, like, get out of that thinking of, like, "What if it doesn't work or what if I fail?" Um, can really help you move past it forward and start thinking about all these ideas and levers that you have to pull. Even if the first one doesn't work, there are other opportunities. Side note again, I was talking to another practitioner a couple of days ago, and she was lamenting that a big project that she had worked on that was a huge opportunity fell through the cracks. And, her boss was sort of like, all right, but how do we got to make like X million of dollars in the next couple of months, blah, blah, blah. How are we going to do it? And she was like, well, I have this stockpile of ideas that we've passed up before. Like, let's pull them out. There's opportunity here. So, I think that was a great example of someone being like, I worked on this really hard and it didn't work out. And it's a big bummer, but here's 5 other things we can try.
But it leads to a backlog or a stockpile of other things that you can take. Yeah, I mean, if you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, there's a word for that. Uh, it's clear from this conversation and the previous one, you've walked the walk in B2B e-commerce. So you've had a variety of roles and a variety of companies selling in across different channels in different ways. Um, the What's some advice that you would give to somebody who is kind of new to the e-commerce, VP of e-commerce or director of e-commerce at a company doing B2B sales? Because I always ask the advice question when I'm talking to somebody who's been a practitioner. And I have met a lot of people with director of digital or director of e-commerce or something like that who they were doing a totally different job, and then their boss tapped them on the shoulder and said, "Guess what? Congratulations, we're going to do e-commerce, and you're leading it." Um, and there's often not a very good, well-defined job description. And to the story you just told, it's not super clear this is a long-term like investment from the company. Um, we want to make sure that there's people who are new to that job, um, who have been sort of thrust into leading digital or leading e-commerce at a distributor manufacturer feel like they're part of a community with peers and practitioners who can say, yes, this is possible, right? Because internally, as you've sort of acknowledged, the conversation is often not necessarily, yes, this is possible. We're going to be optimistic. There's a certain amount of skepticism and naysaying in there, but you zoom out, you widen the aperture to outside your immediate group inside the company, and you will find plenty of people who've done it before. And the work that the B2B e-commerce association is doing is really valuable for that. All of that is for me to say, what advice would you give someone who has just been sort of promoted to VP of digital, VP of e-commerce? how do they approach that job when no one's done it before them at the company that they are, and that's not even something that maybe they've done before? How do they build the right relationships? How do they sell the value of e-commerce inside their org?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point about having community outside of your company. So, the B2B e-commerce association, there are plenty. I mean, I think they have like a kind of like a board where you can go in and chat. I mean, I'm part of it. So you can go in, ask questions of your of other practitioners. There's other associations like that as well, that are practitioner only. So I think those are really important because other people have solved these problems. You can get ideas. So that's a really good call out. But I do think that creating relationships inside your company and with your customers is also really important. Ultimately, that's what's going to make your program successful, is that buy-in, and it's a lot of work to get it. But, I think that if you can build a really deep understanding of what your customer needs from your customer, it's a really great start because it proves to the people in your business that you understand the problems that they're trying to solve. But it also, when you learn from them, it also builds loyalty. So when I was at ISN, we served some pretty large names in the automotive repair industry. And we had a pretty decent understanding of their needs. But we made sure to talk to them because every time we talked to a customer, we were always surprised by the struggles that they had, that they were like, "Can you help us with this?" And I just remember there was one customer who told us that, there was a brand that they purchased, and it was something that they really needed. It was something pretty unique to what they needed to do on a day-to-day basis, but there were some quality issues with it. And they tried calling this brand directly and saying like, "Hey, like you really have to fix this problem." But the brand was like, you don't really buy from us. We don't really, not great customer service. So they turned to us and they were like, "Well, you're their direct customer. Is there a way for you to advocate for us?" And we did, right? And that was something that built so much trust, and helped us understand too, like we didn't know that that was an issue. Like we had never heard that before, but um, so we were able to sort of like take that and understand and build more intimacy with our customer, and understand like broader, like, hey, what other problems could we be solving? So I think that is one, because digital can solve, that problem was a little different, but digital can solve these problems for customers. And we were doing that every day at ISN. But I also think, I mean, other relationships, obviously you want to have relationships with people who believe in the cause, right?
It
Your
helps.
Yes, it does. And build up those relationships, because they have influence. Hopefully you have champions at the very top. If you don't, that's another situation to kind
Oh
of
yeah,
like walk
yeah.
through. But then I also think like learning from your detractors, why are they skeptical? Are they open to trying new things? How do they like to be convinced? Like building those relationships are important too. And, you know, from what I've seen, it's usually with data and results. If you do something for someone who is a champion and you can work with them and show, hey, look, we did this and it had this type of result, and we whatever it is, we built efficiency here, we brought in revenue there, like we have more, more eyeballs, et cetera. That can be a good convincing point for those skeptics, because most likely they're skeptics because they've never done it before, they've never seen it before, that kind of thing. So if you can get some wins under your belts with your champions and with your customers, those show me folks, they may come around. So you never know. Sometimes there's
Yep.
skeptics who are like, "Nah,
Yeah. Build the
I'm
right
not."
relationships is what you're saying. And I think, and be sure to sort of like fill your cup by talking to people who are outside of the immediate
Yeah,
community, and can remind you that it's possible, and also maybe help you with success stories to come back to. And you need to go
yeah,
out and forage stories in the wild of success, bring them back to your company so people can see it's not just this this little like internal initiative that it's a bigger question. It's a bigger
Mhm.
opportunity.
Yeah.
I love it. Um, I know we're getting towards the end of time here. I do want to say I know that you are actively looking for your next engagement, the next manufacturer distributor that wants to do the things that we've just spent the last 40 minutes or so talking about. So I'm guessing you're doing a lot of interviews right now.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So always curious, like, what's an interview question that you wish that people ask you, but that you don't get, or an interview question that you ask them to figure out, to the earlier conversation, how are they viewing digital e-commerce? Is it a weird thing that the leadership is not bought into, or is it a big bet they're making, or is it an established channel? Like, how are you? What do you wish people would ask you, or what do you like to ask people?
Yeah, this is a great question. And one of the things, obviously, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because I'm
Yeah, I
going
bet.
to interviews, but one of the things that I've been asking everyone that I talk to, from, whatever, the HR recruiter to the hiring manager to anyone else I'm speaking with, is just, why is e-commerce or digital, why is this important for you right now? And I have gotten that variety of answers. It really helps me understand if they think of digital as just like another store, and I've had people say that before. Well, it's branch 999 and it's just not doing well. So we have to get branch 999 up and running. That's what they call it. And
Right.
or they talk about their customer relationships, or they talk about um, you know, being able to, grow in certain ways. Like, I think if they can get specific about it, and not just say like, well, everyone's doing it, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then you kind of understand if they really understand what they're getting into, or if they're like, I don't know, someone told me about this e-commerce. I think we should do it. And honestly, like, I've asked that question and have people be like, well, it looks like you're really accomplished, and I don't understand half the things on your resume, and I'm like, well, thank you for your time, right? So
Appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm glad we had the chance to talk. So I think that that's been a really um enlightening question for me to ask. And to be honest, no one has ever asked me that question in an interview. It's like, why is
Oh,
it important? And if you're out there and you're hiring for these roles, I really think that you need to make sure that your philosophy, yeah, call me, but make sure that your philosophy as a company and as a hiring manager matches with these people that you're trying to hire in e-commerce and digital. Because, if you have different ideas about what it could be, or you have different ideas about why it's important, we either need to level set or find someone who shares your ideas about why digital is important and what role it can play in your company. And same thing with other people who are looking for their new opportunities too. Is make sure that you are level set about the importance of digital and why is it important and how you're going to use it moving forward. So
100%. It's something that I see a lot of companies don't necessarily always realize, is that if you want to hire a winner who's done it before, they are auditioning you as much as you are auditioning them in the interview process. Um, and so putting some time and empathy into the interview process people who have been successful want to go someplace where they will continue to be successful, right? I think it'd be the short way of putting that. So, totally understand. Well, that was the last sort of serious question in the
okay.
podcast, Sam. So now is the unserious question that I always ask everybody. And so, listeners, if you're a longtime listener, you know what's coming next. I ask every guest to name one book, TV show, podcast, magazine, piece of media that you consumed in the last few months that stood out to you, that you would recommend to other people. Now, I can see you've got a lot of books behind you on the shelf. I will say that a lot of times folks will give um, like this is an extra credit on a college term paper, and they're gonna like, well, I like to read the 37 Laws of Power or whatever it is, and Dale Carnegie or something like that. That's fine if that's what you're doing. Like, totally respect the hustle. Most people I find aren't actually doing that though, and you get past the sort of the formality of the podcast. You know, it's actually I was watching Succession, but what have you seen that you would recommend to the people who've made it this far in our episode?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll be honest, I've been on a little Lord of the Rings kick lately. Oh, that's what I have been reading.
You're among friends.
Yes. But there is it's a really short little book. It's by John Cleese. If
Okay, Monty
you're
Python, John Cleese.
Monty Python, yes. And it is just about creativity. And it has nothing to do with digital or business really, but I like reading this book because he talks a lot about how in order to be creative and really feed your ideas and your creativity, you need to kind of take space. And I've found that to be really important in my professional life and my personal life. And to just sort of like, you can't just cram the ideas in 8 to 10 hours a day and come up with something good. Like, you kind of need to live with that a little bit. And I, that is actually, I read it recently, and it's one of those books that I'm like, next, next team I have, we are reading this as a team, because I think people get so wound up in productivity that they don't realize that sometimes you have to be unproductive to be productive. So
Boy.
I'll recommend that one.
Yeah, I may quote you to my boss on that one, a little bit. That's a true life lesson, I will say, is that you gotta give the brain space to make connections in kind of an unstructured way if you wanna have connections made. Like, you cannot force that to happen. It's not creativity is not like solving a math problem.
Mhm.
So, yeah, completely agree. Good recommend Lord of the Rings is always good. Um,
Read it. So
so
good.
always a classic, always good. And I did not know that John Cleese had written this book. So I'm
Yeah.
100% gonna pick this up and give it a read. It's on Amazon, so, I can get it delivered to my phone instantly, which is,
You can.
amazing. Sam, thank you so much for joining. This has been a great conversation, very far-reaching, I think. I love action-oriented thinking. I love the framing of sort of branch 999 as how not to think about e-commerce, and I think all the advice that you shared about how digital and e-commerce benefits the entire business and not just one channel specifically, that the investments in technology and process and getting to know your customers and making information available to your customer success people and your customer service people, this benefits the entire business as a whole, not just one line item on an earnings statement called e-commerce. Really appreciate your time, and best of luck in finding the next place to be e-commerce leader.
Thank you. This was really fun. I'm really glad that we did this. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.